All right, how's everyone doing today? Welcome to my channel. We do educational videos on this channel, and we tend to concentrate on theories of everything, all-encompassing theories, cosmologies, grand unified theories from obscure sources, ancient and modern, things that you can use for your paradigm shifting, your awakening to 5D consciousness, your formation of a holistic worldview, and in general for your spiritual, mental, and physical health. And today is the 29th video on Daniel Ingram and his book called Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha. And this is kind of like a reference work of anything that you need to know about Buddhism from a person who's been practicing for many years as a meditator, and really looking at Buddhism as not so much as a religion or even a philosophy, but really as a method, a technology that you can use to wake yourself up and thereby eliminate suffering from your life. There are relatively straightforward and simple steps that can be taken to do that, and that has proven over time for thousands of years in the traditions of the Far East. And Ingram has spent a lot of time over there soaking up whatever he could and bringing it back to us and putting it in our language, practically on a silver platter for us. So that's why we're looking at this. Another reason for the unit that I'm calling the Reciprocal Church, I think this is pragmatic. It's American, even though it's Buddhist. And it is something that we can use to plug the holes that exist in our own religions, whether that is any of the Western religions. There's a lot of psyops, in a lot of corruption in our, especially in our scriptures. And that doesn't mean that everything is bad. It just means that you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but you need to have something to plug up some of the holes. And, Christianity especially tends to slight Buddhism, and even I hear some people calling it Satanism, or meditation is satanic or whatever. You're just sitting there watching your own experience. It's not evil to sit there and watch your own experience. And so there is a lot of room for this way of approaching things in Western society that has not really been tapped. A lot of bad information combined with a lot of neurotic people, combined with maybe too hectic of a lifestyle. And I think this is just what we need at this point. We are about to start chapter 24 of this book. It's called From Content to Insight. Now, if you want to start from day one here, you want to go back about 4 weeks in the archives, and you'll be able to start from day one. But today we're starting at chapter 24, From Content to Insight. In the previous chapter, I explained a method of cognitive restructuring designed to help us stop following distracting or unhelpful thoughts. As those sorts of techniques have an agenda for what happens, rather than an agenda for perceiving something fundamental about whatever happens. They are an aspect of training in morality or concentration, as opposed to insight. However, if we are willing to realize that we can also take an insight-oriented perspective on difficult or distracting thoughts on the cushion or off, then we can begin to make the transition from content to insight. As you would expect, this method is grounded squarely in the three characteristics, as well as the other basic assumptions of insight practices, such as our current sensate experience being the gold standard for reality. This method is probably best known by way of examples, in this case of a few people with a big issue who are on an insight meditation retreat and reporting their experiences. The first example is of someone who is completely buying into the content. Quote, "So in my practice, I've been working through my big issue, really trying to deal with it. It just seems to come back up again and again. Every time I sit on the cushion, I find myself thinking about my big issue. This big issue is such a big part of my life, such a huge issue. I'm afraid that if I look too closely at my big issue, it will overwhelm or destroy me. I wish my big issue would just go away. I've been doing so much practice, and yet I still have to deal with this darn big issue." End quote. Notice that the person assumes the permanence, solidity, and continuity of big issue. Also assumed is that all thoughts about the big issue are either self, the property of self, or separate from self. Further, this person is not working at a sensate level, trying to see the true nature of the thoughts and physical sensations that make up the big issue and the rest of his or her reality. In short, the practice is something other than insight practice. Let's try again. Quote, "I sat down on the cushion and I had barely begun to practice noticing my breath when a thought about my big issue arose. I tried to ignore it, but then more thoughts about big issue arose and my stomach began to feel queasy. I tried to focus on the breath again, which had quickened, as had my heart rate. But then I found myself thinking about the big issue again. Thought after thought, mostly the same old thoughts, repeating again and again." This person is already making progress towards using the thoughts and physical sensations around big issue as a basis for insight by beginning to apply the assumptions of insight practices to direct experience. He is trying to focus on a physical object, trying to notice the individual sensations that make up his thoughts and physical sensations. However, he has poor concentration and has not learned to see the true nature of the sensations that make these up. Quote, "I sat down on the cushion and tried to see each of the sensations that make up the breath. Interspersed with these physical sensations were mental images of the breath. Interspersed with all these sensations were also thoughts about the big issue. They were quick and seemed to also involve some mildly painful or disorienting physical sensations in the region of my stomach. I could see these come and go and that they were observed. I could feel as they arose that there was something irritating about these quick sensations. I noticed that most of my experience was made of sensations that didn't seem to relate to that big issue. Sometimes I noticed that the three characteristics of the sensations that seemed to be related to the old big issue pattern of sensations, and sometimes I could stay with the sensations of breathing. However, regardless of which sensations arose, I was generally able to see some aspect of their true nature. Thus, I find that I can keep practicing and not get lost in old, circular thoughts about that big issue that do me little good and have caused me much pain. These are the sorts of descriptions that really light up a meditation teacher's eyes. They can see that this is a person who is really getting a sense of what insight practice is and how it can be useful. The meditator not only understands the focus and assumptions of insight practices, but is also actually able to do fairly consistent and strong practice. Even being able to do this when we are walking around and dealing with our stuff can be helpful. Shifting to the sensate level reveals things about our stuff that can be very helpful for keeping it in perspective and not getting overwhelmed or engulfed by it. It also develops habits that make it easier for us to shift to a sensate level when we do formal insight practice. Thus, if you have an issue that keeps bugging, consuming, or overwhelming you, try taking the time to see the three characteristics of the sensations that make it up as you go about your day thinking, quote, "The pattern of sensations that make up this big issue are quick, transient, and observed. They are a very small part of the broad field that is my actual sensate experience. They arise on their own and vanish on their own. I will do my best to notice this as sensations occur. When speaking of the big issue to others and to myself, I will try to keep my descriptions at an insight-oriented level. By seeing this big issue as observed and transient phenomena, I will not be lost in and thereby not perpetuate negative and painful thoughts about big issue. I will bring more clarity and spaciousness to my big issue, bring more intelligence and gentleness to my big issue, and bring more common sense and balance to my big issue. If I can do this, it will be of great benefit to me and therefore to others. If I continue to wallow in my circular thoughts about this big issue, which should by now be shrinking to issue, that get me nowhere. I will simply experience unnecessary pain to little good effect. This is my plan and my resolve. Though I may fail again and again to be able to do this, eventually I will break the habit of not being able to see the true nature of big issue, and thus will grow in wisdom and happiness. That's the way the game is played. Just for fun, I will give two more examples from even more advanced practitioners and how they might describe their practice. Quote, I sat down on the cushion and began noticing the three characteristics of the sensations that make up experiential reality. There were physical and mental sensations, all arising and vanishing quickly and effortlessly. I could perceive perhaps 5 to 15 sensations per second, primarily in the abdominal region, but there were many other little sensations coming into awareness from all over. Colors on the inside of my eye, lids on the inside of my eyelids, sounds from other meditators breathing. Occasionally there were some quick sensations interspersed with these about the big issue, like little phantoms vanishing in a sea of flickering color and form. They caused no interruptions to my investigations, being just more sensations for investigation. This is obviously a strong practitioner with solid insight skills. They know exactly what they are looking for and find it. They are willing to make time for bare sensate investigation. We cannot instantly make the transition to this sort of practice, nor can we merely parrot these sorts of descriptions. But I am a firm believer that making clear exactly what we are looking for can make it much easier to make the transition from content to insight. By observing what we can do and looking at what someone at the next higher skill level can do, we will be able to proceed with more confidence that we are on the right track. This last example is a description of practice from a particularly strong and advanced practitioner. Quote, "I sat down on the cushion and the cycles of insight presented themselves effortlessly. There was a shift, and very fine, fast vibrations arose instantly, dropping down quickly with the out-breath. And then vibrations shifted out, getting vague for a few seconds. Concentration destabilized and revealed the quick ending of sensations one after the other, perhaps 5 to 10 per second, and then things began flickering somewhat, getting somewhat irritating, but vibrations remained the predominant experience. It was just that their unsatisfactory aspect became more predominant, and there were a few sensations relating to the big issue." Continuing, I may have noticed a few hints of what dualistic perspectives remain and the basic pain and confusion they cause. There was a shift, and a more panoramic and easy perspective arose, accompanied by more coherent and synchronized vibrations, including most of the sensate reality, including much of space, with a more flowing and open quality than before. There was a short period of barely noticeable but mature equanimity in the face of these, as the fluxing of space and its textures became more inclusive. Any sense of practicing dropped away entirely. A minute later, 2 of the 3 characteristics presented completely in quick succession, including the whole background of space, revealing something incomprehensible about the nature of subject and object, and reality vanished. Reality reappeared, quiet, clear, beautiful, and easy. I solidified space in that afterglow, so as to enjoy the formless realms for a few minutes, rising up through them and back down to boundless space. A vision relating to the big issue arose. I stabilized on the cushion, noticing the feeling of it, and before I knew it, I was out of the body, traveling in a strange realm, having interactions that replayed the big issue in symbolic or mythic form. I saw something about this issue that I never had before, how an old, unexamined, and fictitious train of associations led to my inability to come to some more balanced understanding of this issue. This epiphany broke my concentration, and I returned to my body. I then dropped out of the formless realms, allowing a new insight cycle to begin again. When I got up off the cushion, I noticed that the psychological insights that arose in the other realm gave me an increased sense of humor and a more compassionate perspective toward those involved in this issue. They were just trying to be happy, just as we all are. It will be interesting to see how this plays out." End quote. This practitioner has talent and a wide range of skills. She's not only an advanced insight practitioner, but also has strong concentration skills and can even chance into some of the more unusual concentration attainments. Further, she seems to be able to use her ability to travel out of body to gain relative insights into the content of her stuff, which is not necessary but can be very skillful if consciously done. Last, she is on the lookout for the subtle signs of the limits of her insights. She's not only skilled, but acknowledges what she does not yet know. She is well on her way to mastering the core teachings of the Buddha. That's the end of chapter 24, and it's also the end of part 2. So we're moving now to part 3, which is called the Shamatha Jhanas. And that begins with chapter 25, which is called Introduction to Part 3. To me, the word jhana, J-H-A-N-A, a Pali word that literally has 2 basic meanings, one, to contemplate, and to burn up, as in to burn up unskillful states of mind, refers to a whole mode of attention, a whole broad package of mental aspects and possibilities that are vastly more essential than they are typically considered to be. Traditionally, there are said to be 8 jhanas. They are called simply the first through the 8 jhanas. The first 4 are called formed jhanas, largely to differentiate them from the last 4 jhanas called the formless jhanas. The formless jhanas are states that take ratified experiences, such as boundless space, as their object of attention. It can also be useful to split the 8 jhanas into subparts, as each one develops in a predictable fashion in substages, and these can be useful to the technical practitioner when exploring various modes and aspects of attention and the vast range of experiences that we can access in the jhanas. The 8 jhana classification system, while elegant in its simplicity, also requires a lot of qualifiers to be able to handle anything like the vast range of possible meditative or jhanic experiences. I will attempt to add some of those qualifiers here, realizing that this is an elaboration of the older system, an upgrade, if you will. The additional terminology comes from a number of sources, the most important of which is the work of the late Bill Hamilton. Bill was kind enough to teach me his broader, deeper, and more sophisticated and nuanced approach to describing meditative experience using the jhana framework. Bill's system looks at fundamental aspects of the jhanas as well as how those might be noted in a huge range of experiences that span various objects, degrees of concentration, practitioners, and styles of practice. I am extremely grateful to Bill for teaching me this system, as it opened worlds of possibility in terms of meditative development and has made it much easier to get a sense of what is going on with my own or others' practice. It has also allowed the use of much ancient meditation theory to attain great insights and stages of concentration in contemporary practice. I'm deeply grateful to all the teachers and practitioners who have contributed to this body of literature and practice technology. From my point of view, the jhanas are more fundamental modes of attention than the stages of insight or the concentration states. They are core aspects of our attentional anatomy, a description of something basic about the nature of a specifically tuned mind. The second edition of the book will use the jhanas as the fundamental framework for discussing the stages of mastery to a greater degree than the original version did. Hopefully, this will solve a host of problems in the first edition. I received many excellent questions about specifics that I later realized I had not made very clear, and hopefully this structural adjustment will serve to address at least some of those questions. It is also much closer to the way I think about practice and jhanas, though it will appear to some readers to diverge from orthodoxy even more than the first edition did. There are more finely grained frameworks that we can use to parse some of the more intricate aspects of the experiences we can turn into, such as stages of insight detailed later. But for our purposes, there is lots to be said for the jhana terminology. The jhanas describe how attention develops and are broadly applicable to any human developing concentration in any meditative tradition. Sort of like the embryology describes the development of a baby in the womb. The jhanas are very predictable stages that nearly all practitioners go through as they develop concentration. Some may find the fine slicing of jhanic experiences into subparts and sub-subparts completely off-putting. It is an understandable reaction. If that aspect of this section is not useful at this stage in your practice, ignore it and read on. However, one day it might be useful to realize it is there. Should you ever suddenly think to yourself, wait, I am seeing that stuff clearly now. Wow. It is entirely possible that, should you practice well, you may one day come to appreciate the elegance and power of this system. Until then, focus on the more basic elements, as they will take you a long way. I advanced pretty far in my practice before I learned about these deeper elements, and they would have made no sense to me initially. Okay, I think we're going to stop there for today, but tomorrow we will be starting up with chapter 26. That is called The Wide World of Jhana. And that'll happen tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in today, and have a wonderful day.